Hi, I'm Caitlin, and this is Book Chats. Today's Top 5 Wednesday is Top 5 Books of the Year so far. So, because I've been doing monthly wrap ups and talking briefly about all the books I've been reading so far, and because this is the books that I have been reading this year, I'm going to not talk about them a lot extensively. I'm going to just try to point you back to where I have talked about them more. This was actually more difficult than I thought. I was thinking, like, I've been picking a favorite book of each month, and so I'll just go through and use those. Then when I really looked at the aggregate, I read a lot of really good books in May yet, so I really had to decide, like, which of these and all these things. There was a couple books that I hadn't rated yet because I wasn't really sure at the time how I felt about them, and I had to like place those within. And then just like over time, how my memory remembers things. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna start at. There's quite a variety of books on this list, so I'm gonna start book number 5, which is Longbourn by Joe Baker. This is a book that I talked about in a Top 5 Wednesday at the end of April, and I hadn't finished it yet. I finished it in May. It is an adult novel that looks at the servants in Longbourn, the house that the Bennets live in, during kind of the events of Pride and Prejudice and a little before and a little after, but it really focused on the lives of the servants. I love how this book really allows you to see familiar story and familiar characters in a new light and a new way. And it's really about the servants. It's not really about the Bennets, which I thought was really great. So I definitely enjoyed this book. I think anyone who's a fan of Pride and Prejudice should pick it up. Book number 4 is The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. So I stared for a long time at Blue Lily Lily Blue and The Dream Thieves, trying to figure out which of them would make this list if either. And ultimately, even though I was disappointed at the very end of The Dream Thieves, I think the book as a whole was a stronger 4-star book for me than Blue Lily Lily Blue. And I'm so excited for the final book in the series to come out this fall. I listened to all of these books on audio, and I will definitely be listening to that one on audio as well. There's so many good things I have to say about these books, and maybe when I'm closer to that release, I'll talk about them again. But I feel like I've talked about it a lot on my channel so far. Book number 3 is a book that I actually haven't talked about yet, but I will talk about in my wrap-up. It's Angel Fall by Susan E. So this is a book that's had some strong buzz for a long time, and I just was like, I don't really read angel books, whatever. I just wasn't necessarily, it was on my list of books to read, but it wasn't really high up. And then I saw that the final book in the series was coming out in May, so I was like, okay, well, I'll check it out at the library. And I checked it out, and I had this stack of like 12 books. And I put a picture on Twitter, and my like book twin, which is this person who like we have the same taste in books, guys. It's amazing. She was like, Angel Fall, oh my gosh. So I picked it up, and it was a little slow in the first like 5 pages, but as soon as the angels appear, you're like in. And it's so interesting. It's a great post-apocalyptic book. It's really like realistic and makes me feel like, yeah, this is really how like everything in society would break down and really how one person would be scrabbling to survive. It has things that happen that you're just not expecting. It just is so interesting, and the world that's being built in the book is so interesting, and I loved it. And I am excited to finish this trilogy, and I hope that the rest of the books are just as good. Now, book number 2 is my only nonfiction on the list, and it's Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande. It is about dying, and specifically dying in the United States, and how the U.S. healthcare system is not designed to deal with that, and how what we do with people at the end of their life, and end-of-life care, and how you make decisions about end-of-life care. And it is so interesting and so useful, and just a book that I feel like a lot of people should be reading and thinking about these kind of issues. And I listened to it on audio. Definitely it was good that way, but I also probably want to reread it sometime on paper, because there were some great questions and things that I would like to just see and not just hear. It was great. It was very personal and also very practical, and I definitely recommend it. Book number 1 then is one that also sort of represents the other book I've read by this author, although the other book I've read by this author I finished last year. It is Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy by Gary D. Schmidt. I've talked about Gary D. Schmidt more than once as this amazing author who I was just recently introduced to by a friend who just writes these characters that are so real. All of his characters are so complex, they're so real, and I feel like they could walk off the page and just be a real person that I know. And they're also all historical fiction, or the two that I've read so far are historical fiction. And so Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy, I didn't realize until I finished it, is actually based on true events. And it's funny because the things to me that I was like, man, Gary D. Schmidt, usually you're more nuanced than this, and usually, you know, characters have more gray, and if I don't understand, you know, why these characters are like this and this is going to happen, actually he was using that character to behavior to explain the real life events that he kind of based this book on. It is, oh my gosh, just a mastercraft. It's a middle grade book, but it's absolutely worth reading. You should totally check it out. Or check out his other book that I have read that I actually read last year, which is Okay for Now, which I actually like a little bit more than Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy, but I like them both a lot, and that's why this is really the #1 spot, because it's really just representing Gary D. Schmidt's work and how highly I value it. So those are my top 5 books of the year so far. I hope that I kept this nice and short for you, and I will see you guys pretty soon with my May wrap-up. I'm going to just film it right after this.